Hey, Pastor Steve Waldron here, New Life Pentecostal Church, Albany, Georgia. Hope you're doing great in Jesus. We've been taking just a little comparison between the Christian Standard Bible, this, and the King James Version of the Bible. And what we're doing is just kind of see some of the minor ways that are actually major ways they're different. And when you do, King James Version, MAV, New King James Version, KJV 21, Modern Little Version, I think, all of these that are like Byzantine text and all the other designations people have from that Textus Receptus, and we know there's nuances, minor differences, and all this between the Alexandrian text, critical text, Nestle-Aland text, United Bible Society text 5, whatever you want to call that. There's a few verses that you tend to focus on, and then you'll hear people say, well, but 99% they are alike. And so we're just in the New Testament. Definitely that's not true in the New Testament. And so we're just kind of doing like a double-blind study, so to speak. Like I haven't looked these up in the CSB ahead of time, and we're just going to see. The only thing we're really showing here is that there are differences, and they're not just minor differences. There's major differences in many ways. So people say, well, the CSB or these others are just easier to read, but they say the same thing. That's not really true. And the Bible talks about the importance of words, letters, even parts of letters, jots and tittles, according to Jesus Christ. So let's just look at this. So we're in the Lord's Prayer in Matthew 6:13. I think I stopped with the Luke's Lord's Prayer. And 6:13, let's do the King James first. It's large print here. It says, "And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen." 6:13 in the CSB says, "And do not bring us into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one." So now, regardless, deliver us from evil or the evil one, that's a difference. But then, "For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen," is missing. And some people say, well, the reason it was missing is they were trying to make it comparable to the Lord's Prayer in Luke 11, when, it's a form of prayer, and one, I think, was a Sermon on the Plain. This is the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 6, that type thing. So we should just be honest enough to leave it the way Jesus said it in each instance. And, as Arthur Cleveland Cox, that great classicist from Cambridge University, or was it Oxford, back in the 1870s, he would say that overwhelmingly that scribes would decline from the text. There were declensions. They were removing text. They weren't adding to the text like Westcott and Hort postulated, the conflations of majesty. And so, but the overwhelming thing we're talking about now is that's a difference. That's several words taking out there, what is it? 13 words, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 words. And so, so it is different. John 5:16 is another instance of this. We'll see, sometimes like the Christian Standard, even the UBS 5, the Greek New Testament reinserts a lot of King James readings because they've been seeing the validity of it. So just their intellectual honesty, they've been having to reinsert some. So John 5:16 says, "And therefore did the Jews persecute Jesus and sought to slay him because he had done these things on the Sabbath day." So let's look at John 5:16 in the CSB. Lord willing, I may get a large print CSB to do this with sometime. 5:16. But I do thank the Lord I've been able to see it recently. Must be my Sure Sight I'm drinking or something. Or maybe it's just the Lord helping me. Okay, 5:16. "Therefore the Jews began persecuting Jesus because he was doing these things on the Sabbath." So let's look at the difference here. It says, "And therefore did the Jews persecute Jesus and sought to slay him." And sought to slay him. So that's totally different, Not just persecuting, but we're going to kill Jesus. And that's how mad they were about Jesus doing this on the Sabbath day. And so that's a vast difference. In Luke 11:54, let's let's see the difference there in Luke 11:54. Now, I've already done several of these videos, 6, 7, 8. I don't know where we're at. So you can see there's just a lot of differences between the CSB and the King James Version of the Bible. And sometimes it's things that you just wouldn't normally look at. Okay, so Luke 11:54 says they were lying in wait for him to trap him in something he said. Luke 11:54, they were lying in wait for him to trap him in something he said, whereas in the King James Version, laying wait for him and seeking to catch something out of his mouth that they might accuse him. That they might accuse him. They were lying in wait for him to trap him in something he said, laying wait for him and seeking to catch something out of his mouth that they might accuse him. So that they might accuse him. Totally taken out. So you wouldn't get that. You might say, well, I think the King James is wrong. Okay, that's a whole nother discussion on the textual family, where this would come from, what ancient church writings we would have these in, what translations, whether it's Syriac, Bohairic, Sahidic, and on and on. What's the evidence that it was supposed to be like that, something different? What we're discussing now is that you just can't say, well, they're the same thing, CSB is just easier to read. They're not the same thing. And so we're showing several differences with material differences in meaning. So Matthew 20:22, Matthew chapter 20, verse 22, this is James and John coming to Jesus, and it says this in Matthew chapter 20, verse number 22 is going to say, all right, Matthew 20:22, it says, Jesus answered, you don't know what you're asking. Are you able to drink of the cup that I'm about to drink? We are able, they said to him. Okay, so 20:22 in the King James, that was CSB, would say, but Jesus answered and said, ye know not what you ask. Are you able to drink of the cup that I shall drink of, and to be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with? They say unto him, we are able. So, and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 words different. And so it's not just the same thing, but easier to read. Those are vast, big material differences, especially when Paul is making a difference between one letter in Galatians, seed or seeds. You know, Jesus is talking about jots and tittles, which are pieces of letters. Okay, so John 13:23. John 13:23. Let's see the differences here. This is at the Last Supper. John 13:23, the so-called Last Supper. And John 13:23, we'll see what it says in the CSB. John 13:23. We'll get there. John 13:23 says this. It says, one of his disciples, the one Jesus loved, was reclining close beside Jesus. He was close to Jesus. Now, there was leaning on Jesus' bosom one of his disciples whom Jesus loved. So, you know, you've got few inches of difference there. One is reclining close, and one is actually in this position listening to the heartbeat of Jesus. Now, our Western sensibilities might not like that, but in the East, you know, friendship, you know, David, Jonathan, their love exceeding the love of women, all this kind of stuff. When I was in Nepal, I realized in Asian countries, like two men, two women, if you're best friends with them, you walk holding hands. There's nothing at all immoral or sexual about these things. It's just a sign of friendship. So that is a difference right there. 1 Corinthians 11:24. 1 Corinthians 11:24. I think we're going to see another big difference. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 24. And you can see why these changes were made. It was like they thought maybe it was an incorrectness in the text or bring an error in the text. But 1 Corinthians 11:24, it's talking about communion, an institution of communion. And it's talking about Jesus. He said when he had given thanks, broke it, and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." All right. And so 1 Corinthians 11:24 in the King James says this, "And when he had given thanks, he brake it and said, 'Take, eat, this is my body, which is broken for you. This do in remembrance of me.'" This is my body which is broken. Now we know not a bone was broken, but his entire body, it's like his constituency, was broken. So which is broken for you is totally missing, broken for you. So you can see that there are vast material differences between the King James, the Christian Standard Version of the Bible. I've done many videos just on the CSB. We could do this on many modern translations, but really we're just looking at and saying, not even arguing, which is the best. And I may have thrown in a few things. You know my thoughts on that. I'm a big TR guy and big King James guy. But that's not the argument here. The argument is when you read them, are the text comparable? And no, the texts are not comparable. So we'll pick up here another time, God willing. I'll talk with you later in Jesus.